What's up, everybody? Welcome back to another video from the 10-7 MMA channel, and we are back on the topic after a little bit of a hiatus of Khamzat Chimaev talk. We're back on the topic of Khamzat Chimaev, my favorite fighter in the UFC. Although there are some pretty incredible fighters on the come up right now, fighters like Alex Pereira, OGs, I guess he's an OG now, he's been around for a bit, that are doing incredible things with an amazing wow factor. But we still come back to Khamzat ultimately being my favorite fighter and the fighter that I get most excited to watch. And I had to highlight this interview that MMA Joey did with Kevin Aioli, which reinforces what I've been saying from the get-go. And this is Kevin Aioli, an OG, or OOOOG, I should say, of the MMA journalism game, one of the most respected voices, if not the most respected in MMA journalism. Now, for those of you guys who don't know, Kevin Aioli actually recently retired from being a journalist, but he did pop on MMA Joey's video and interview to discuss a plethora of things. One of those are Khamzat Chimaev. So I'm going to let Kevin Aioli take it away. I made a video, let's see, about a year and a half ago saying that I believe Khamzat Chimaev will be the greatest and most famous potentially fighter of all time for a number of reasons. But one of the, and even surpassing Conor McGregor, which they do talk about in this video. And a lot of people think when I mention the Conor McGregor thing, they think you're crazy. There's no way, because he's not as eloquent as Conor. He doesn't talk trash as well. He doesn't have the bravado and all these things. And it's funny when people give that response, what you're doing is you're setting the standard, you're setting the bar as though the next McGregor must be essentially a clone of McGregor. It must have all those same attributes, but just amplified, which that is not the case. That's not necessarily the case. We didn't know what Conor McGregor would be before he came onto the scene. Maybe prior to that, we're envisioning a Mike Tyson clone or a Floyd Mayweather clone or whatever. But Conor had his own style and his own flair and his own ability to gather the masses and get people behind him. And Khamzat, I believe, in a similar fashion, can do it in his own way, but a different way. So we're going to go through and explain. I'm going to let Kevin Aioli praise Khamzat and explain exactly, for the same reason that I believe, why he thinks he can be the most dominant fighter in the UFC, but also one of the biggest stars. And I'm going to color it with my thoughts along the way. Maybe a little points of contention here and there with what Kevin Aioli is saying, but very small, because he's saying he can be at the top in amongst the top 4 most famous fighters. I think he can be number 1. So, and I'm going to talk about why as we go through. But first, I'm going to let Kevin Aioli take it away, talking about what we are witnessing with Khamzat Chimaev and the level of skill that he possesses. And by the way, this is way less of a hot take now after we saw what he did to DDP, but I think it was that a lot of people or getting mad at me and disagreeing with me and saying Khamzat is totally overhyped, totally his power and his skill set is, I'm totally exaggerating it, but now I think that dissension has quieted down quite a bit. Check out Kevin Aioli right here.
But I love Khamzat as a fighter, and I think, he is really badass. And if we say his worst performance was his performance against Kamaru Usman, that is saying something, right? Because that was pretty good against a really good fighter. If that was the worst performance of his career, or the Gilbert Burns fight, one of those two, I think you might say was his worst. I thought what he did to DDP was incredible. And I think he's going to be champion for a long time, and he could be I still believe he could be a multiple division champion.
Yeah, I said in the lead up to this fight, and we may have even talked about it in the past, that Khamzat Chimaev's win over Kamaru Usman was the most underrated win of all time, because the way he ragged out Usman, particularly early, and it's not, I know Usman came in on short notice, but he swapped in for Acosta. Right. Paulo Costa is a totally different matchup. And then the fact that he beats Kamaru Usman and he goes a hard 3 rounds. Granted, okay, he got tired at the end, but he goes a hard 3 rounds against a Kamaru Usman who, I know this is a bit of a stretch, but could arguably still be the welterweight champion. He had the win over Leon Edwards up until he got KO'd in the 5th round. And then in the rematch, it was very, very close, and it seemed like Usman was a bit gun shy because of the head kick.
Right.
So you have
and on top of that, you have to also recognize that Usman's pedigree in wrestling is second to none. The guy has, I think, had 1 takedown landed on him. Maybe it was by Leon Edwards. Maybe Leon Edwards caught him by surprise. Colby tried to take him down multiple times. I know Colby claims he got a takedown. Maybe he did, maybe he didn't. But to do what he did specifically to Kamaru Usman, and again, like MMA Joey is mentioning, that was short notice for Khamzat as well. 10 days notice, he had to swap out Paulo Costa, which had a totally different fight style for Kamaru Usman, and he still was able to control him that way, I think is pretty substantial, but I'll let these guys continue.
A world where Usman's stepping in, he's still in shape, even though it's short notice, and he goes out there and does something to Usman that nobody else has ever done. I thought it was the most underrated win of all time. And then he goes out there and does what he does to DDP, who, look at DDP, undefeated in the UFC. And people kept saying going into that fight, DDP late, it'll be Khamzat early or DDP late. And they question Khamzat's cardio. And he goes out there and shows the 5-round cardio. I don't know who in the middleweight division can beat him. I'm with you, man. I don't see somebody in the middleweight division that can beat him. And right now, if you...
By the way, I just want to point out, it was a little clip there. Joey said, yeah, everybody said Khamzat early, DDP late, and Kevin Aioli shook his head. I knew that was a BS narrative as well. MMA Joey called it out, though, very vocally, saying that he thinks he'll get him if it goes the distance as well. And that not only did he get him, he got him bad. So props to MMA Joey on that one.
If he were to go up and fight Alex Pereira, I would pick Khamzat, and I would be 100% confident that Khamzat Chimaev would beat Alex Pereira.
Yeah, no, I think he would be the light heavyweight champion if he went up and did that. You know, I mean, like, you had to be fair, you know, Khamzat came out like gangbusters in 2020, and, you know, the Meerschaert win and all those fights. And then, you know, when COVID hit and he had trouble and he had health issues, you know, he didn't perform at the exact same level that he did. Now, of course, the competition was getting better, but he had that period where his health was really in question. And I think I told you privately a couple of times, you know, his health is not good. And, you know, he didn't compete on a regular like he was doing before. And that takes a toll on you and everything. I think his health is now back to normal, and we're going to see him A, compete regularly, and B, I think you're going to see him be, you know, he's going to be up there among the most dominant UFC fighters and MMA fighters of all time. You know, he's nowhere near the greatest of all time yet, but I think that he has that kind of potential with what he's able to do. I mean, this guy punches very, very, very hard, right? And he's got that wrestling that's incredible, and the ground game, everything that he can do. He has the ability, like, you know, sometimes guys don't max out all their ability. He has the ability to be the greatest MMA fighter who ever lived. Does he do that? You know, we'll have to see. He's got to go ahead and go out there now and start stringing together wins like some of the greats have done. He hasn't done, that's the one thing he hasn't done yet, right? He hasn't on a regular basis gone out there 2 or 3 times a year and beaten the best in the world. If he does that, which I believe he's capable of doing, you know, he has an argument that he could be the greatest ever.
I've been saying this from the get-go, and on top of that, he mentions the punching, but not just the punching, the full all-around Muay Thai. The kicks are phenomenal as well. People are writing, I don't think, give him enough credit for the Gerald Meerschaert knockout. 1-punch KO power, one and done. When have we ever seen that from people with incredible wrestling pedigree? And that was at middleweight, by the way. When have we ever seen that? We've got phenomenal wrestlers like, obviously, Khabib, Islam Makhachev. We have these guys like Merab, and obviously they're all incredible, all amazing, all dominant. I don't know one of them that have a 1-punch flash KO knockout against not a chump. Gerald Meerschaert, yeah, he's had some losses, but he's got a long record. He's had a ton of fights. He's had like over 50 professional fights. If I off the top of the dome, I think he's like 34-20, something like that. But he's no slouch. And to think that you can just write that off and not give it any credit in terms of his amazing striking abilities is completely wild to me. But there you have it. Like I said, I said this a year and a half ago when a lot of people were doubting Khamzat, that this guy can very well, and I believe will be regarded eventually one day as the greatest MMA fighter of all time because of what he can potentially do. And I thought he was going to be the first triple champ ever. Now, Alex Pereira might challenge that if he ends up going up to heavyweight after this John Jones fight at the White House, which I think is going to happen. And so he might be the first, but Khamzat hopefully will be the second. And they talk about that a little bit more as well in this video.
I do agree with you that there is a possibility of Khamzat Chimaev. Think about it. If the UFC just books him, let's say they give him consistent fights and he blows through a Nasruddin Imavov. He blows through whoever else is coming up in the rankings. For some reason, I'm drawing
Fluffy Hernandez, you know, would be.
Yeah, Fluffy Hernandez.
Allen.
Because first off, I started thinking of RDR, but we know what just happened to RDR,
Yeah.
so obviously he's not in the mix right now. But imagine he goes on a run where he defends the title 3, 4, 5 times and then says, you know what, I want to go up to light heavyweight. the light heavyweight division isn't that talent rich. I got to be honest, the higher the weight class, kind of the crappier the divisions get. Not that it's not good at the very top, but he could go on a crazy run and not only cement himself as one of the best of all time, but I wanted to ask you this as well. I believe that Khamzat Chimaev, now that people are going to be like, they're going to be down in the comments, Joey, you just glazing Khamzat. But I wanted to ask you this because I truly believe this. If Khamzat fights somewhat regularly and doesn't run into any injuries or illnesses or circumstances that keeps him out of the cage, I believe that Khamzat already is, but can become one of the biggest stars in the UFC. I'm talking Conor McGregor level, maybe not that much, but pretty close to Conor McGregor level. I believe Khamzat Chimaev has the ability to become close to that big of a star as McGregor was in his peak if he starts just demolishing these guys and running through them and continually competing and putting on great performances. What do you think about that? Is that crazy?
It is absolutely not crazy. I'm going to chime in before Kevin Aioli talks, and Kevin Aioli is going to give probably a more reasonable take, but I not only agree with Joey, but I believe he will surpass Conor, and I can talk about some of the reasons why, and I do think some things have to happen perfectly for this to go down, but I think it is set so that I think he can easily achieve this goal of becoming the biggest star, the face of the promotion, and a new level of fandom and international stardom as well. So again, going back to this idea of Conor, you're thinking we need a Conor McGregor clone with that same swagger, with that same bravado, with the same ability to talk trash and all that. I think Khamzat's talking trash talking is actually better than Conor's in some respects because it's just real. It's raw. He doesn't mince words. He seems totally impervious to any sort of mind play or mind games. He comes into the cage with a smile, and it's not a forced smile. The guy is absolutely terrifying, and it's crazy to watch that level of just confidence and willingness and desire and love to fight and all these different components. And I think as he goes on and just will continue to have that bravado, yet slice through the competition, we're going to see that stardom level rise and rise. Now, the other thing is there's this funny narrative going around that Khamzat's a boring fighter. And I can't, the notion of it is hilarious. Somebody was telling me about this earlier today, that a bunch of his friends don't really like Khamzat because he's boring. And I'm like, so just from a pure logical and mathematical standpoint, that is a nonsensical statement because nobody called any of his previous fights up till the DDP fight boring. That was never part of anybody's vocabulary. What he did to Robert Whittaker was incredible. Even the Kamaru Usman fight was amazing back and forth. He didn't get the finish, but the first round was unbelievable. What he did to Kevin Holland, Li Jingliang, I mean, these were all like jaw on the floor performances. And then you have one performance that to me was still amazing, like so amazing and impressive, but because he didn't get a finish and because there wasn't a crazy amount of action, a lot of like strikes thrown with intent to finish, at least that's the perception, that now people labeling him a boring fighter. Hey, do some math, do some statistical analysis. If you have one fight that doesn't enthrall everybody the way that you're used to seeing, does that all of a sudden make Khamzat a boring fighter? Of course not. And by the way, he wanted to go out there and stand and bang. If you listen to Arman Sarukian and listen to the footage and the discussions in the corner, he wanted to do that. They wouldn't let him. And I'm glad they didn't, because wiser minds prevailed, and he went out and got the belt. Now he can go be a little bit more chill and do his thing. But I think that once people get back on the train of realizing, dude, he's not a boring fighter. He's one of the most exciting fighters, if not the most exciting fighter ever to watch. And the way he makes grappling and submissions and ground and pound and the KO power, rolls it all into one, is super exciting. I think people will gravitate towards him and he will blow up. By the way, he's already blown up. He's already got over 10 million plus followers on Instagram. This guy is already a superstar. But when we say how far can he go, I think he surpasses Conor McGregor.
I don't think he's, when I think of the three biggest stars in UFC history, and two of them are going to be, you're going to agree, you mentioned one, Conor McGregor, George St. Pierre would be the other. The third one would be Khabib, right? Khabib, it was massive in Russia. People forget how big Khabib was. And, Khabib was absolutely massive, and he became very popular in the United States. I find it hard to believe that Khamzat is going to be able to surpass those three. But I think he has a chance to be in that realm. Like, I do believe he is a big star already. People, us in the United States, we think of the US only, but there is a big world out there with a lot of countries with a lot of people in it. And, Khamzat is huge over in the Middle East, and he's huge in Russia, a lot bigger than you think. And because he was based in Sweden for a while, I think even in the UK area, he's well known and popular. And like you said, if he fights on the regular, and if he gets a couple big fights, like, you have to, big fights are what makes somebody really big, right? The Jose Aldo fight is what made Conor McGregor explode, right? He was getting bigger and bigger and bigger. Then he knocks out Jose Aldo in 13 seconds. That was a fight we forget now. We think of what Jose Aldo
exploded his star power.
We're going to pause it right here. So I find it interesting that Kevin Aioli begins this monologue by saying, I find it hard to believe that he can achieve those levels. And I'm going to say why in a second. But of course, what's the formula that it boils down to? Let's at least talk about Khabib and GSP, not Conor as much per se, but for those two, it was extreme dominance. Let's really talk about Khabib in particular. Extreme level of dominance plus a fun fight style. Even though it was grappling heavy, he went to the ground and did a lot of ground and pound, a lot of damage, and just dominated everybody in the same way. Nobody had to answer for it. And then on top of it, we had a great personality, a truth teller, a trash talker by just telling the truth. We got something similar with Khamzat, but Khamzat's got his own flavor. He's not a Khabib clone, but he says it like it is. He's also not afraid to get in there and throw some jabs and be a little cheeky, a little mess with people a little bit. We remember when he fought Gilbert Burns, he's telling Gilbert Burns that he looks skinny. Like, Khamzat's got a little bit more of a sinister side to him than Khabib. So all he's missing now from that formula are the wins of the dominance. Okay. And I think that is going to come, is the point. So I don't see why it's so hard to believe. But then we talk about the super fight. He needs that one super fight to take him over the top. One beautiful rivalry to really elevate his star power to the next level. And it's here. We have it. They didn't mention it. They haven't talked about it. But it's the one that you guys can probably already guess, that's on the tip of my tongue. One person and one person only that he needs to have a super fight with is Sean Strickland. It's a bad blood rivalry. Sean's been talking a lot of trash about Khamzat for like a year and a half or however long it's been, just on repeat. And then he's upping the ante by saying, I do think it's funny because I think Khamzat will smash Sean Strickland. I hate to say it, and I know he trains with Justin. I know he's a great fighter. It doesn't mean he's not a great fighter. I just think Khamzat has his number. It is what it is. I think it's got a really bad matchup for Sean Strickland. But anyways, Sean is at least in his mind, or I don't even know if he believes it himself, but he is at least convincing probably some people, that his fans, I guess, in particular, that he can beat Khamzat. He's saying, I'm the only one that can beat Khamzat. I'm sure there's going to be people that are going to believe him. He's not going to hold back. He's willing to trash Khamzat every which way about his personal life, his character, his abilities, and him like leaving this country and that country and why. I mean, Sean's already trash talked him to such an extent. When they actually are matched up, if this does happen for the White House card, which I'm praying, we are going to see crazy levels of trash talk. Khamzat's going to be unflappable, unfazable. He's probably going to talk some trash back to Sean Strickland on some sensitive areas that I will not mention, but I think you know what I'm talking about. Some things that had caused him to tear up at different points and whatnot. You know what I'm talking about. That's going to go back and forth, and we are going to see an amazing, amazing buildup culminating in what I believe will be a smash shutout performance, and that will be the rocket ship that will shoot Khamzat to the moon. And this is what he's talking about. So it's right there. It's right there for the taking. All the pieces are set up on the board. We just need Khamzat to get through Imavov. We need Strickland to win his next fight. He's calling out Fluffy, which I think is going to be a really tough fight for him. I don't know why he's calling out Fluffy, but I guess he wants that fight. Maybe he truly thinks he can win. I don't know, but we just need Sean Strickland to win his next fight. Khamzat will smash Imavov, and the two shall meet at the White House card, I think, and it will be epic.
You think about that, right? But you look now, and they had press conferences all over the world, all that crazy stuff. That's how big that fight was. And then he performs that way. That made him a massive star. And he comes back in his next fight and he becomes a double champion at Madison Square Garden. So Conor had that. Khamzat's going to need that kind of thing. Like, he's going to need to fight a Pereira. He's going to need to fight, if he reels off 4 or 5 more wins in middleweight, goes up to light heavyweight and beats Alex. And, I know you said people are going to accuse you of glaze, and they're going to probably say to me, you know, I think this guy could beat some heavyweights. I'm not going to say he can beat all heavyweights, but he can beat some heavyweights, right? And if he gets the right matchup at heavyweight, I think he could win a heavyweight title.
Triple champ. And this is, again, what I said from the beginning. The funny thing is, when Kevin Aioli was on a live stream before an MMA Joey's, I asked that, and I'm like, I believe Khamzat can be a triple champ. And he kind of laughed at me. He's like, triple champ, no. Double champ, yes. Come on. He's not going to be a triple champ. And I was like, but why not? He's so skilled, and you move him up there. I bet a lot of the heavyweights, if not all of them, and eventually as Khamzat gets older and he naturally bulks up, why couldn't he be a force to be reckoned with such a superior skill set, such a differential in the wrestling abilities and the striking abilities? Why not? Now Kevin Aioli is saying, at least he's saying he could beat some heavyweights. I think the perspective and the narrative will continue to change eventually as he moves up to light heavyweight. If he has a dominant performance there, then everybody was saying, oh my God, send him up to heavyweight, just like they're saying now for Pereira, send him up to heavyweight and see what he can do. Oh my gosh, this is a very exciting day to be a Khamzat Chimaev fan, and I feel a little vindicated to have one of the most respected, notable names in the sport, the legendary Kevin Aioli, come out of retirement just to set the record straight for all us Khamzat Chimaev fans. There you go. Khamzat is a legend, and that's all I got to say about that. Thank you guys so much for joining, and we'll see you in the next video. Take it easy.